This is Animal Crossing on the Gamecube. It's a weird little game. When you play it and New Horizons back to back, they barely feel like games in the same series. The vibe each one is going for is just completely different. Whereas New Horizons puts the emphasis on decorating and customizing your character in town, the original Animal Crossing instead goes the Survey Monkey route to determine how you should look. Then you get a house in a completely preset town. You don't get to move anything around. This is an already existing town, you're just moving into it. The only customization here is really just your house and outfit. But even with the outfits, if you're a dude, you're always required to be a Viking for some reason. The music is mostly just these sick beats. I am particularly fond of the cat instrument. The villagers are rude at times, and all the content was included at launch, all things foreign to the series now. And I actually played the GameCube one after I played New Horizons. I didn't grow up with this game, so this isn't just nostalgia bias. Animal Crossing on the GameCube has a unique charm that I think has since been lost in the series, but that's a topic for another day. When we talk about the unique charm of this game, there's always one thing that comes up, one thing that's exclusive to the GameCube game, the NES games. This is probably the coolest feature in any Animal Crossing game. A game within a game. More than anything else in the series, this to me is what makes it truly feel like a life sim instead of just another video game. There's something really special about collecting these during the course of normal gameplay, whether it be from raffles or shooting down a balloon. Then when you're bored of this normal gameplay, you go inside your house and start playing these classic games, just like I do in real life. New Horizons doesn't have these games despite totally being able to connect to the Switch Online library. They could have provided access to the NSO games in Animal Crossing as a nod to the GameCube one, but that would have taken away development time, which was better spent on adding features like the fishing pole breaking mechanic. But again, we're not talking about New Horizons, we're going back to a happier time. 8 NES games can be found just by playing through the game normally, and though we may look at a few of them, I'm not going to tell you exactly what those 8 games are because I think it's more fun to find out as you play. 2 games require a Game Boy Advance connection, again I won't say which, and then there's the games that can only be accessed via code given to Tom Nook. These were giveaways that Nintendo hosted, and these games I will tell you about because you'll never get them unless you go out of your way to get them. There's Soccer, Punch-Out, Donkey Kong Jr., and Donkey Kong 3, and there's one more that we'll get to in just a second. Obviously these giveaways are no longer active, but the Animal Crossing GameCube community was able to reverse engineer the code system in such a way that we're actually able to access these today. You just need to find a website that has a working code generator, type in your player name and town name, and then boom, you got the code. But the most fascinating thing about this is the last game that you unlock with this method. This game is Clu Clu Land D, a game that never left Japan until it was released here in the original Animal Crossing. So what is Clu Clu Land D? To explain what it is, we should probably start with the original. Clu Clu Land was a black box NES game from 1984 that some would say is just a Pac-Man clone, but I would disagree with them as the gameplay is vastly different. The only similarity that I see is that it takes place in a maze-like area. You play as the character Bubbles, who though today is a somewhat obscure Nintendo character, was once popular enough to be considered as a fighter in Super Smash Bros. Melee, before the Ice Climbers eventually took the spot as the NES era representative. The gameplay of Clu Clu Land consists of navigating around these mazes and filling in these gold bars to create some kind of picture or pattern. What makes this hard is that the movement does not work in the way that you think it would. Instead of Pac-Man, where pressing a direction on the D-pad will send Pac-Man headed in that way, Bubbles will instead stick out her hand to grab onto these poles which will start to swing her around in a circular motion. You then let go when you're now facing the direction that you want to go in. It's an abnormal control scheme that's very hard to get the hang of. If you press one of the buttons that corresponds to the front or back of the way that she's moving, nothing at all will happen. You have to make sure that you always press a button that corresponds with her side. While filling in the puzzles, you also have to avoid these sea urchin enemies called the Yanira. You can stun them with the B button, which will have Bubbles shoot a shockwave at the enemy. Then you can push the enemy into a wall for extra points and take them out of play for a little while. You'll also need to avoid the holes that they spawn out of, and watch out for other obstacles that appear, such as the trampolines, which will bounce you in the opposite direction of the way that you hit it. Later levels will punish you for going back over the ingots that you already discovered by turning them upside down. You can't solve the puzzle until all the ingots are right side up again. However, I have no footage of this because I'm not nearly good enough at the game to reach that point. And that's pretty much Clu Clu Land. I adore this game. I think it's one of the best high-score based NES games, and spoiler alert, it's another one that you can get in Animal Crossing on the GameCube. But what exactly is Clu Clu Land D then? And why did the developers feel the need to include it alongside the original in Animal Crossing? Well, this game is actually an expanded version of the Famicom game made for Nintendo's arcade Versus system. A lot of Famicom games made the jump to the Versus system, often with slight gameplay adjustments and added content. This is exactly what happened with Versus Clu Clu Land. Less common though is the expanded arcade version making the jump back to home console, which is what Clu Clu Land D is. The D in this case stands for disc, as in the Famicom Disk System. So in short, the original Clu Clu Land on Famicom was ported and expanded upon in the Versus arcade version, and then that expanded version was ported back to the Famicom Disk System. But what were the changes? Well, this version of the game has way more puzzles than the original, meaning there's way more content here. The music is different as well, which is fine, however I always preferred the original's music. And also a boss enemy was added. If you kill a certain number of Ynira enemies, a giant one-eyed Ynira enemy will appear creatively called the boss Ynira. He functions the same as a normal enemy and still goes down in one hit. Slamming him into the wall will give you a ton of extra points. Another cool thing is that the Animal Crossing versions of these games all retain the ability to play with 2 players, Clu Clu Land D included, which is a ton of fun. Although Mrs. HydratedGaming is not a big fan of this one, as she usually just spins around in a circle. She doesn't really get how the controls work in this game. So that's Clu Clu Land D. And I think it's pretty cool that we have a physically preserved version of this game just because of Animal Crossing. This weird fact adds to the long list of what makes this original Animal Crossing just so unique. I think the series could greatly improve by looking back at some of the oddities like this and incorporating that same spirit for future entries. As for Clu Clu Land D itself, it's a really fun version of Clu Clu Land that's worth playing in my opinion. The controls take a bit to get used to, but once you do get used to them, you'll be having one of the best arcade-like experiences that the NES library has to offer. And at that, I'd like to thank you for watching Hydrated Gaming. I hope we all learned something today. We'll probably never use this knowledge again in our lives, but then again, we all had to sit through Hamlet in high school, which was similarly useless. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.